Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Commonwealth for YouTube. I'm here to continue my read along for the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound. I'm still on chapter 4. Sorry for the delay of this, guys. Episode 727. When Trask takes advantage of the Collins' generosity, will Barnabas take advantage of his charity? Charity Trask, Nancy Barrett. Quentin, revived, is distressed to find no one in the tower. He and Barnabas dislike Trask, who's now staying at Collinwood, but Quentin mistrusts his cousin from England more. Later, Trask's daughter arrives and knows Rachel. The latter later reveals to Barnabas that she was once forced to work for Trask, who abused her when she was younger. Barnabas retaliates by biting the younger Trask, meaning Charity, for those who've never watched Dark Shadows. Charity Trask, for those who've never watched DS, is Reverend Trask's daughter, who's played by Nancy Barrett, obviously. There's a great moment in this episode early on. Trask is in the drawing room, praying to literally the high heavens. Full force, and Barnabas walks into the foyer from outside. He hears the religious ecstasy rolling within the drawing room. He knows who it is. And he knows who it is, sorry. And he knows right that place, sorry. And he knows what all of that implies. At no point has anyone in history said, "Oh God, a Trask is here. Our troubles are over." As if his mission wasn't difficult enough, it was just a year or so ago, kind of, that he was having to wall a Trask up. That should have fixed it. How could an ostensibly celebrate guy have such a legacy, and seemingly do so from behind a wall of bricks? Yes, he could have had his kids beforehand, but it's not as interesting to contemplate. I don't know it is about a really forcefully uttered prayer by a guy in a long black coat and mutton chops, but it is a portent of doom like few others. Jonathan Frid captures the only rational response. It's not so broad as to ruin the day of theology enthusiast, but it definitely lets us know that he's not hearing a blissfully gentle cover of Moon River either. And Barnabas's expression subtly conveys the rarest quintessency of an understanded. Oh shit, that simply commands that I use the word for none other suffixes. Of course, like any irresponsible critic, I read into these sins what I want to. And in this case, as he's processing bellicose and biblical booming from beyond the door, I wonder if Barnabas is asking himself, should I hand up my coat, stroll in, and engage in thoughtful banter, redolent of implicated knowledge and planned counterstrikes? Or should I simply hoist my cane afloat and beat the bullying bastard into 1898 before he can screw up the storyline anymore? Banter wins. Later, Quentin enters strangely, complaint to Trask until he's alone with Barnabas. In that scene, we see both Quentin's strength and his weakness. Barnabas must overcome. For a moment, we see them collaborate against a common enemy. Quentin, however, assuming everyone is as opportunistic as he is, turns his suspicions with wearing inevitability toward Barnabas, cueing our hero to again show the patience of one of the saints embarrassed by Trask's allegiance. It's frustrating, but it illustrates the size of the challenge confronting Barnabas, and again outlines the overall arc of Quentin's story, indicating that it's only the beginning in structure and complexity. It's an arc that may very well be the show's greatest narrative triumph, necessitating 9 or so months to tell. Mechanically, Barnabas and Quentin have very different story arcs, not only in particulars but in the gears of the storytelling itself. Clearly, Barnabas has the longer story in a number of episodes, but he also has a longer arc in terms of sweep and span of life. Barnabas' story is not about what his origin does to transform him, it's about what it leads him to do with his life. Quentin's story is shorter, especially in that everything interesting people is knit up in his origin and immediate aftermath. No wonder Quentin seemed wasted after 1897. What else could they do with him? His story is about going from boyhood to manhood. Barnabas' story is about going from being a man to, ironically, a god, a master of time, space, and the very plasma of life. He would sometimes reject his godhood, sometimes embrace it. Quentin could never use his condition to any advantage. Barnabas' true curse was that he could. Beyond that, the episode putters along perfunctorily. It's another episode, and Trask recruits, this time letting us know that Rachel was his prisoner. Sorry, I messed that up. Yeah, okay. Was his prisoner, and that his daughter loves the power to say no as much as he does. Well, Barnabas has other plans. Unable to crush him immediately and suspended by Rachel's fright, Barnabas lets it go. Well, other eras of Barnabas would let it go, but the 1897 Barnabas is Silver Age to the point that I'm amazed Willie Loomis didn't become a talking dog sidekick, which would have been great. Like, a spaniel? I digress. This Barnabas might not punch Trask's lights out, but he can at least bite his daughter and hold her in his sway as spy and saboteur. Besides biting and controlling, Nancy Barrett is a legitimate part of the cycle story that the show is developing. She's the only dependable Trask I know. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. This episode was broadcast April 8th, 1969. Episode 727, take 2. When a scheming clergyman demands that Collingwood praise the Lord, will Quentin pass the ammunition? Gregory Trask, Jerry Lacey. Barnabas and Quentin spar over the location of an escaped Jameson. Trask arrives and threatens a terrified Rachel Drummond, who liberated herself from his abusive school after being punished for a teenage tryst. Barnabas attacks Trask's daughter at the end of the episode. Doubles, twins, reflections, and a terrible school. The story of Worthington Hall revealed in this episode is a story of stunning cruelty, and the audience experience of enduring its master. Gregory Trask, until the very end of 1897 storyline, is excruciating, but it is a pain shared by Barnabas and Quentin. By all rights, either had the moral sanction to drag him to the old house and have Magda turn him into goulash, but they don't. Why? Quentin is already in transformation when he returns to Collinwood for this story. He just doesn't entirely know it. The guilt of abandoning Jenny may not have him wringing his hands, but his desire to keep her isolated from his life is not the attitude of a devil may care cad. A true cad would disavow that there was anything to hide. Quentin at least has the conscience to want to deceive. So regarding Trask, he's playing by more rules than he might have once disobeyed, even if he's just trying to stay in Judas' good grace. That's at least an acknowledgement of consequences. Additionally, the man was just a zombie and spends time in this episode pondering why and how. Quentin's most monstrous moments are when he has no mind at all and must hear reports of what he did. While his conscious mind was out, it will be the same thing as when he is the werewolf. And this is a foreshadowing of that. If Barnabas' secret is one of urges kept under wraps, Quentin's is deeper and more existential. When Barnabas seizes upon his capacity for evil, it's because he is choosing not to be good. Quentin, however, is slowly learning to choose goodness, but has something so cursed within him that a monstrous manifests itself whether he tries to make a choice or not. The lesson of Barnabas is that some have free will that is excruciating to exercise. The message of Quentin is far more 20th century. Free will is irrelevant. We are the monsters. Our crimes are done unconsciously. In both cases, he's revealed as such by a curse, because I think revealed is more appropriate than transformed. Quentin, by abandoning his family, dies to them, but he comes back. His damage, however, continues despite his rebirth. The second curse simply makes him aware of what he is and what he does. Just by being himself, it's not really a curse. Then it's a window. His struggle after the painting is finished resides in being an evil man who must choose not to be. The painting becomes his gift to see himself whenever he wishes. It's a constant reminder. Barnabas is a good man, finally mastering the choice to invoke evil and not choking Trask on the spot. Here is a tough choice for him to make. He is Quentin's mirror in this sense, and in this episode, both men address the same mysteries with information the other lacks. Being two sides of the same sorry, metaphorical man, they naturally mistrust each other. Only through tragedy and courage will they learn to trust and confide in one another. If 1897 is about anything, it's about virtue and vice learning to acknowledge that each has an invaluable element of the other within it. Vice gets things done and can do so with a sense of justice, judiciousness. Virtue does more when it can admit that its representatives need their liberties of vice to fight the villainous. Trask exists as a counter to both. Sorry. His grandfather had good intentions wrapped in a toxicity he couldn't see. Gregory is a toxic man who is wrapped in a cloak of good intent, knows it's only a cloak, and doesn't seem to care who else sees it, because they're not going to take the risk associated with calling him on it. If the Emperor with the new clothes were an intentional exhibitionist, he'd be Gregory Trask. Both Quentin and Trask learn that they are fundamentally evil people, but Trask likes it. He's Quentin's dark future, where the cat of Collinwood has gamed the system to a point above reproach. He even resembles a dystopic Quentin from Earth 3. Sideburns, long coats, and charisma, and a hypnotic sense of lust. Quentin eyes the ladies, but Trask practically carries them away to a mental sargolo as he leers at his own daughter and savors his power to punish Rachel for smooching with someone other than him. We begin to give Quentin a break. Quentin is simply a chauvinist. Trask is a misogynist. Misogynist, sorry. The difference is demonstrated by watching the two men in contrast. And here's Barnabas navigating between the two and realizing he might not be so bad either. He's in his social milieu and has enough of the hang of the vampire thing that he doesn't have to use it. I'm sure he wanted to when Trask asked him to leave the drawing room, but that would have called attention to himself. This is a long game. Instead, he plants a spy with Charity and gets on with the large work. His first mission is to free himself from the irony engine that is 1897. Yes, Trask and Quentin are two ends of a perverse spectrum. Just as Barnabas and Quentin are dark reflections, Quentin especially as a ghost, and Trask are dark siblings. Both invaded Collinwood when least expected, attracted by the promise of power, and both have designs on the estate's heirs, David and Jameson. The coincidence could not have escaped Barnabas's attention. He's been fighting to free the present from the past. Quentin and Trask plot to direct the future from the seat of the present. All Barnabas has to do is stop them. This episode was broadcast April 8th, 1969. Episode 730. As Quentin descends with Jameson into the world of occult, chicanery, Edward learns that the past can be a real mother. Laura Collins, Diana Malay. As Quentin uses occult influence to prevent Gregory Trask from taking Jameson, Laura uses Nora to insinuate herself into the house. This disrupts plans both good and bad, and Edward is stunned and incensed at her return. Laura arrives in a brazen move by the show, shouting back to the primary supernatural threat from the show prior to Barnabas, which means prior to most viewership. Diana Malay gives a shockingly relaxed, modern performance as the returned Laura. She brims with confidence as a character and as an actor, arriving at the worst and best time. Laura's proto-reemergence is classic, 1897. The story arc is the show's first shot at Dickens, and nothing screams Dickens like terrible timing. Ask any high school student with any essay due on Bleak House. Children about to be sent off to an unthinkably cruel boarding school met their long missing mother in the nick of time, but does she offer a more diabolical form of escape? No wonder the record and sky high ratings were reserved for this storyline. If the 1795 storyline were written for housewives, allowing them to be Vicky, out of place and glamorously persecuted, Josette, except no one else sees it, the blind fools. wait, I think glamorously pursued, Josette, except no one sees it, the blind fools, and Angelique, and hear her roar. This was aimed more at the demographic running home from school. It's written for kids in front of the TV, and it's talking about weird parental dynamics openly and from their point of view. This kind of depiction of liberal parent versus stern appeals to any child with a disciplinary in the roost, or who wishes they were someone who cared enough to be one. It provides fantasies across that spectrum, and it really layers the truths because it's not black and white. Yes, we know that Edward is ultimately on the right end of the spectrum. He just has no idea what's really going on at Worthington Hall. Quentin is also on the right end of the spectrum. Yes, the man wants what's best for Jameson. He just can't overcome the fact that he's the uncle who educates before he schools. And while this is fun, it's not sustainable. And then there's Laura, who's all about love and fire. To what degree does Laura actually care for the kids? She did abandon them, after all. And to what degree is she trying to satisfy an evil fire god? Yes, I don't think they are mutually exclusive for her. And the kids on the show and as viewers get a little of everything. Laura is about indulgent passion for her kids. Quentin is about indulgent fun. Edward indulges with structure. He actually cares more than either of the others because it's more than a convenience, and yet he lacks the tools to demonstrate it any way that Jameson and Nora can appreciate. The clever thing in the episode is how Lewis Edmonds' performance shows that dichotomy. When Nora is terrified of the face in the fireplace, Edward is determined to erase that fear. He attempts it terribly, but he tries. The show then takes us to the conversations that the children don't see, yet concern them. Say what you will about Edward, but he puts his full passion into raising the children. He stayed at his post when the trainees, Quentin and Laura, ran off to Alexandra. That's why Quentin only snipes at him. With 730, Dark Shadows becomes an increasingly masculine show. And I don't mean that in some two fisted, brutal, 5 o'clock shadow sporting, bud swilling, rowdy Roddy McDowell sense. Yes, men cause a lot of problems on the show, but often as dupies and dopey and dupes and dopey, and people who think with more romance than reason. But they often have soulful vulnerabilities or elements of amusing self contradiction that add a puckish dimension to the depiction of men. Only in people like Gregory Trask and John Yeager do we see purely lustful evil at this point. After this point, sorry. And some of this is by contrast. A year ago, Vicky and Carolyn and Julia were all wringing their hands about the life and death of Peter Bradford. And well, okay, Vicky had just returned to see a man torn apart like a dog toy in the jaws of two jealous and competing females. Our hero was powerless in Angelique's shadow. It was still Vicky's show, and we all just lived in it. But with her story vaguely resolved, it belongs to Jonathan Frid. The beautiful thing about both Frid and Barnabas is that they don't seem to want it. There's no printing and scene stealing. Just as Barnabas serves the family, Frid seems to serve the show. In the service of this episode, we have to recognize the entire ensemble. David Hennessy is the respectable skeptic, not predisposed to believe Nora's ravings about their returned mother. David Selby effortlessly sells the rapport with Jameson that demonstrates why the latter haunting will be inevitable. Diana Malay is the ultimate weekend mom, and a believable one. And then there's Lewis Edmonds. Good gravy. Talk about service to the show. There is no such thing as a wasted Lewis Edmonds scene. That's never been truer than with Edward Collins. Roger may have the most of his episodes. Joshua has the most mythic importance. Parallel Time has those fabulous scarves. Brutus is named Brutus in sports and pointy beard, which is its own reward. But Edward Collins is the most prized creation as an actor, relentlessly stiff, yet never predictable. He's the spirit of late Victorian zest and progress. Hilariously so. In this episode, he says both chicanery and humbug. So there you go. I was so excited I contacted Wallace, who lamented that balloons didn't drop from the ceiling. Edward is the prime Victorian male archetype, which is a polite way of saying well written stereotype. At the same time, he always has the capacity for surprise. When Edward reveals or discovers a new layer of himself, which as such as when he becomes Edward Collins, Vampire Slayer, I have no choice but to buy it because Edward Edmonds completely justifies whatever the writers cook up. And just wait for the transformation Count Patofi unleashes. Edward's inner life of meek subservience says everything about Edward's almost fetishistic adherence to obligation, social codes, and the safety of a rigid limit of options. The man has more structure than a Stephen Sondheim song, and he's every bit as witty and refreshing. Just watch the fun Edmonds has, and you too will start giggling in precisely the manner that would merit a severe upbraiding from Edward. Perhaps a strong reprimand, a searing indictment, is not out of the question. That's a likelihood of a thorough caning from an experienced hand, and inevitably a healthy diet rich in salubrious roughage, hail Edward Collins, its high priest. And whatever you do, be grateful for Lewis. God bless Edmonds. This episode hit the airwaves April 11th, 1969. Diana Malay. Her passing as a her passing has a poignance to it on many levels. For many fans, Dark Shadows was a part of their lives since its first episode went on the air. It was a contemporary show rather than a piece of another generation's nostalgia. As one of the first cast members, only 31 when she took the part, it is a wistful reminder that the show is on a steady course to becoming an animal that lives completely in memory. As Laura Collins, she followed Burke Devlin as a feared and much talked about piece of the recent past that refuses to be done with the Collins family. Is she a reminder of the past sins? Given Roger's cold and distant nature, it's easy to assume that she is the victim of some sort there to rescue David from a paternal love, paternal love so vacant that Liz is compelled to order carry out in the form of Victoria Winters. Instead, she adds to Roger's complexity. When we find that she is the show's first real female villain, causing us to think twice about who he was, not only that, but she sets the stage as the first real outsider. Female, creating a motif that balances Vicky. Vicky is also an outsider, but one who seeks only meaning and identity. Like Angelique after her, she represents the danger of women from the larger world. Laura allows us to appreciate the positive nature of the woman on the show. So, or sorry, on the show we've so far met. A primary, a primarily female audience was given a band of surrogate sisters, and now they and we have to close ranks against the interloper as that her greatest legacy was the first supernatural villain on the show. Ghosts are fine, but can they truly stack up against a living creature with an agenda? Not in the drama department. The introduction of Laura is the program's first long running risk into the personified paranormal. Yes, there was the ghost of Josette, but she's expected in a spooky house and exits at this point as a special effect more than a truly interactive character. For all of the credit given to Jonathan Frid as the show's first great supernatural foe, Laura has him beat. Not only that, but as a type of monster with no heritage nor blueprint. I'm still not sure what a phoenix is, but Diana Malay certainly was the cool confidence of her performance. Successfully charted that the new frontier of for the show and made safe every choice they tried afterward. Interview after interview gave Malay the platform to describe the joy of helping to create that character. She identified strongly with the mystical, alluring creature, both lustfully of this earth and empowered by primary forces beyond time. In her hands, the novel nature of the threat was an invitation for ownership and creativity. That self assertiveness cemented a character that is as credible as it has fantastic. MLA gives Laura a set of missions that should contradict each other but don't. She is ancient but contemporary, tied to the past of Roger, his ancestors, and countless fathers before, but she is decidedly contemporary, also existing on her own, with no need for the Collins material resources or status. Yes, she needs something, but it's the most unjustly ignored element for the Collinses' wealth of the Collinses' wealth. David. Malay relishes her performance like, like few on the show, and like the concept of the Phoenix itself, is a study in contradiction and balance. She convinces us that she is a loving mother and a ruthless force of hellish consumption. Few performers can maintain both those impressions, but Malay had to and did. She was impressive to pigeonhole as someone with only one dimension thanks to the delicate nature of her acting. We experienced David's twin senses of total fear and total need. She had to bring both of those elements out in David Hennessy so that we could experience genuine sympathy toward his plight from her first moments until the end. I'm still undecided about the fate he faced beyond the flame. It's a totally irrational curiosity, but Malay's dedicated sincerity is impossible to ignore. The ad adage age in performance is that every character is the hero in their own eyes. With Dana Malay, we never doubted. When she returns as a character, it's a harder sell pitch, but she manages to do so again. Yeah, she does. With a twist. Now undeniably a villain, Malay repeats her mission with a more colorful bent for unapologetic evil. She's no longer an unopposed god among mortals. The presence of Angelique, Barnabas, and even seasoned occultist Quentin gives her a reason to to revel in her plans rather than coyly allude to them. It's yet another dimension to a character of teasingly elusive possibilities. Millay delighted in her identification with the role, often insisting that she had worlds in common with her. As a cast member dedicated to mysticism, going so far as to write several books on the subject, she has both an ensemble member and a committed fan of the show's subject matter. Sorry, she was an actor, reveler, and even thematic ambassador. Of course, she wrote about the supernatural. Of course, she wrote and performed motivational lectures. Put the two together, and you have Laura and the Phoenix and Malay and the ebullient sense of mischief that made us believe that Collinsport was a world of possibility for everything that followed. All right, guys, I'm going to stop right there. When I come back, probably Sunday night, I'm going to pick this back up on episode 732. Link to where you can get the Dark Shadows Daybook Unbound will be in the description box. Guys, go pick this up if you haven't already. Really, really good. I love the dedication to Diana Malay that I just read. Really, really great by Patrick. Really awesome. Um, she was a hell of an actress. I mean, if you've never seen Diana Malay perform the Phoenix in either 1897 or the beginning or the Phoenix arc in the beginning episodes, go check those out. Dark Shadows, by the way, is free on Tubi. The original series. All right, guys, you guys have a great night. I'll see you tomorrow night. Bye bye.